Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 44 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with Max Lee, who's a senior software engineer in the Bay Area. Hi Max, how are you?
Hey, Chow. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited about this.
Thanks for being on the podcast. So how's your week going?
The week is going well. I have been working on this app and it's about ready for testing, so excited about that.
Nice. Are we going to be looking forward to it being released soon?
Yes, and I'm going to add you as a beta tester if you don't mind. Aside from that, school starting next week, so that's big. So we're in like a back to school mindset, which I think is appropriate for this podcast, right? Because that's definitely a big parenting thing, is getting your kids through that school experience.
Yeah, and I would love to test your app for sure. So thanks for adding me as a beta tester. But also, how old are your kids? What grade are they going to?
So I have 2 girls, 6 and 4. The older one, she's headed into first grade, and the younger one, she's headed to TK. She was lucky enough to qualify with the cutoff because I guess for people who don't know, TK is transitional kindergarten. It's kind of a thing that's being rolled out in California, which basically like starts elementary school a year earlier. So it's like a grade before kindergarten, which is pretty great.
And it's great because you could save money on sending them to like preschool all day, but also they get to experience what it's like in elementary, right? And she's probably excited to be with her sister in the same school. That's a huge step.
Yes. And I think what's really good is that she has a lot of experience at the school because of her sister. So she was always dropped off second in the mornings. So she would hang out in the mornings. They had like a lot of different events at the school. Like there's like a garden day where people work on the garden there. And so she's been to that. So it's like familiar territory. I think she's pretty pumped to be joining her sister, starting TK. There was a graduation ceremony at her preschool. It was really cute. And she was like very excited to get her preschool graduation diploma.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah.
I know when my oldest, when he was graduating preschool, I was like, what? Why is there a preschool graduation? That doesn't make any sense. And then, like, after I attended, I was like, oh, these are really great. Like, I'm so happy I was invited to it, because they're so cute. Sometimes they have the little graduation cap and the little diploma and the pictures. It's very memorable.
Oh yeah, and I think it is a big jump because our preschool was like fully play based. It's like a Reggio Emilia style, so there wasn't that much structure, and there's a lot more like hand holding. There's like the ratios were like I think maybe like 4 to 1, and then now she's going to TK, and it's like I think it costs like 23 to 1. There's actually an assistant teacher, so that makes it a little bit more reasonable.
But you look at that teacher and you're just like, oh, I'm so sorry. 23 to 1 compared to 4 to 1. Like,
Yeah,
they're not that much older.
definitely a big change. Yeah.
So is TK, is it half day?
It's actually full day, but what they do for the first month is they do minimum days. So one thing they do out here, and it's throughout the year, is like there's a what they call a minimum day. It's just a short day. Wednesdays are typically what it is. So school ends around 1:30 then, opposed to 2:45, which is the normal time the school finishes. But for the first month, it's like the whole month is minimum day. So she gets out at 1:30 every day. We're probably gonna ease her into the after school, the younger one, and then once she's like settled in, then we'll go for it.
So is the after school care, is it on campus as well? Or and what time is that till?
So they have one on campus, but it's in high demand. So we're on the waiting list for that. There's a program that's like right nearby, and they just basically walk the kids over. It's like maybe like a 5-10 minute walk away from the school. It's at a park. It's run by the city. Our older daughter spent all last year at it, and she loved it. They keep it fun. The staff there, they're really good with kids. And, it's like we have mixed feelings about this, but they give a lot of like yummy treats. And I think the kids love that.
I had the same where the kids will go to after school care and then like sometimes they'll come home with like a cupcake or a chocolate or just some random junk food that I've not seen before. And I'm like, do I say something? But then they're so happy with it too. You know, I don't want to be that parent that's like, no, my kid is the one that cannot have any of these. Too bad. But they love it. And sometimes they don't even eat it, they just love getting it.
Yeah, totally. I think if you keep food pretty healthy at home, they should totally have that because they're going to be exposed to that. Like, I know you've been through the birthday party circuits, like Halloween and like, all the different opportunities to get bagfuls of candy. So they're going to have that. And like, I feel like if you restrict it too much, it'll backfire in a bad way.
It'll backfire. Just making it available for them, they actually don't want it as much. Whereas like that mindset of like if it's restricted, then it's like this like forbidden thing that they really want. But when I have a bag of candy in the cabinet, they don't even want it.
Yeah. And I think we're doing okay there. The kids, they appreciate your sweets, but they don't get too upset if they don't have it. And just being honest with myself, I totally love sweets and treats. I'm always, and same with my wife, we're always down for that ourselves. But we try to regulate as much as possible.
Yeah, it's hard, especially with kids. It's harder.
Yeah, there tends to be more of that around.
So, what brought you into a career in tech?
I think it kind of just happened like, you go through kind of these different experiences. Like for me, I was really into computers when I was a young kid. I credit my brother for really bringing computers and just like tinkering with like programming into our home because like he got really into it. I think he had friends who were into it. So I played around a bunch. I was first into games. Like games is what drew me to the computer. And then I saw what he was doing and I was like, wow. So then I remember like trying to pick up learning basic, what I started out with, and kept up with that for a little while. I really enjoyed it. I think I veered away from that for a little bit in high school because in high school, other stuff, is happening. You're busy, getting ready for college, social life, that kind of stuff. When I went to college, I was like, not going to initially go into engineering or computer science, but I think I took a programming class and I was like, this is fun. And this is, it's coming back to me. So I guess I doubled down. I ended up majoring in computer science and have been working a bunch of random different tech jobs since then.
What was your major when you entered college?
I switched majors a couple times. I first thought I was going to do like biomedical engineering, and then that seemed like a great fit when I kind of looked farther down the road and what might have been laid ahead for me. And then I ended up switching to writing. There's a short time when I wanted to do that because I really enjoy writing. And again, I think for that, I was like, maybe it was like me being practical. I was like, what can I do with this? Or maybe not having enough confidence in my own writing. Can I actually, make it as a writer? Once I got a bit of a taste of computer science as a major, I was like, this could work. I'm enjoying it. It's fun.
That's awesome. It's awesome that you were also able to explore different things to finally find the one that you enjoyed. And I was curious, you say you started with like playing games. What was the first game or the first two games that you played that you really liked?
Oh, wow. So I guess I'm dating myself. I think Sierra games were pretty popular then. It was like Sierra. There was like ID Software. They also made games. Like Sierra, I think I played King's Quest, I think was the name of the game. There was this game called Dexter where it's like you flew this like robot plane type thing.
Were these games that you installed with a lot of CDs or floppy disks?
These might have been floppies, actually, yeah. I think this might have predated that. And then also Commander Keen, I liked a lot. Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, that whole like kind of first-person shooter, got into those. Text games, I was really into text-based games too, because those were fun. Zork was one I liked.
That's neat. So you're playing like all these different games, and that's what kind of got you interested in that space. Did you ever think, I want to build the games?
And I did write a game eventually, like I think probably around like junior high. I think when I was like in middle school, I think I played around, I had a book and I tried to experiment with different very simple games. And then maybe in junior high I tried to make something more ambitious, first person shooter type game, like an adventure game. I never finished it. I think, life got in the way, but I got pretty far. I was trying to make it like online enabled so that you could do, but this is like back in the days of modems and stuff like that. And, this would have been enabled through like a bulletin board. So
That's so neat. Do you still have it?
the computer that a lot of my stuff was on, like the code for that was on, that got donated when I was away at school. I lost all that. But what's funny is I found an old printout of the code and it was cool to look at. I was like, oh, wow. I was like, this is how I thought of things back then and how I approached it. It was like a bunch of really long functions.
That's really neat. So how many years were you working in tech when you became a parent?
Probably around like 16 or 17 years. So a while, yeah.
So were you already a senior software engineer at that time? What was your role?
I was, yeah. So at that point, I was like pretty experienced. So that's why I think it made the timing right because I felt pretty comfortable in my role and my job. My wife and I, we were ready for it, and we were lucky enough to have one and then another kid.
That's really awesome. So, what was the parental leave like with both of them?
It was pretty awesome. I mean, this is in the heyday, the golden era. This is when there were very, very generous leave policies. So either parent would get 20 weeks off. So it's like a little over 4.5 months, which was huge because like the early weeks, days, weeks, months are so important. And you're just overcome with like just emotion from that experience. I wonder how other people, feel about like having to like go right back to work. 'Cause some people, I think, especially I think on the East Coast, like leave policies aren't as favorable out here in the US. I think it's just a lot harder. So very, very lucky to have had a generous leave policy.
Was it 4.5 for both kids?
Yeah, I had both kids at the same place.
That's really great. And did you take it all at the same time?
I did. And I thought that was the right move because I felt like the early months were the most important. My wife was lucky enough to have, a similar generous leave policy. So we both took it all in one shot for both. And then they both started off at daycare after that.
That's great. So, having taken like 4.5 months each time, what was it like going back to work after? Tell me a little bit about that.
For both, it's hard, but I think first it was a little bit harder because of the newness of it all. And because of becoming a dad or a parent, it definitely triggers a lot of introspection and a perspective shift because you're like, okay, this is now the most important thing I should be focusing my energy on. My work was very important. I took that seriously too. But I think just reacclimating to having meetings and putting up code reviews and, just that experience. Because like at the same time, you're like missing your baby, it's like, they're off at daycare. But that was on me. I think that was for me to figure out. And it didn't take too long, but I think, the first few days were the hardest part and then, got easier as it went on. And after a few weeks, then you just get back into the rhythm. I was lucky enough to have a pretty awesome manager and awesome team. And that made all the difference, I think. When you're lucky enough to have that, they try to make things like comfortable for you, right? You look out for your team, I feel like I, tried to do the same for, people on the team when they went off on their leaves.
Yeah. Is there anything that you learned from like the first time going on leave that you did differently the second time? Like whether it's in preparation for the leave or something you did differently during the leave?
I think there was a big difference because for my first kid, I was an IC. So there was definitely a transition involved before I went on leave. I gave a pretty long heads up to the team. Once I knew that it was happening. And in terms of like transitioning, there was like, a lot of the other engineers, they could pick up whatever work that you had been focusing on. For the second, I was a manager and there was just a lot more to like button up and transition. So that was definitely a lot more things to think through. I probably was a little bit more uneasy about taking that second leave because of, the team. But again, I had great support there from the team and my manager that made it possible. But I did my best to make sure that there was like a very clear and thorough like transition plan that like anything that was kind of in progress, I would either wrap up or like thoroughly document like what needed to be done, that kind of thing.
And I imagine it's very different because when you're an IC, it's like just taking care of your own projects and stuff, right? But then when it's like a team you're managing, it's like making sure everybody on the team is okay, making sure they know what to do with their projects. And there's just a lot more that you need to account for.
Oh yeah, like way more.
And then if your daughter is 4, that means you had her also during the pandemic, right? The second one.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. That was a wild and difficult time. But I think once we had our baby, the fact that the world was kind of on fire at the moment, you're able to like step back from that and like just focus on the baby, right? So, but yeah, that wasn't the best possible time to have a kid, I would say, because things were tricky. Even, what was up in the air was like whether I could be there for the birth. Lucky for us, the hospital where we had her, they made sure that I was able to be there. I was able to stay there, even though, that was like just a couple months into the start of the pandemic.
That's so, I don't know, I'd be so anxious, if like you don't know if, never mind if your family can't be there, but like if your partner can't be there either, I would just feel so anxious leading up to it, especially since it's probably a lot of back and forth, right? Like, will I be? Will I not? You just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that was stressful. I think there were lots of things for everyone, especially parents for sure. Kids at home, childcare options like shut down, homeschooling, remote education.
Right. What was it like going back to work after the parental leave? Because then your older one is at home too, right? And then you have this newborn.
Yeah, so lucky for us. So our older one, she was still in daycare because of the pandemic. we kind of kept her at daycare a little bit longer than we had originally planned. So like right around when she was like 2.5, we were planning to move her into like a preschool, but we like put that off because we loved our daycare, and they shut down for a little bit, like most places did when everyone's trying to figure out what was going on. But they did open back up, and it was honestly like a place of comfort and refuge for us because we were pretty close to daycare providers and the other families there, and we were kind of all in it together. We were all like worried and concerned. We kind of knew that, kids seem to not get it as infected as often, but you just didn't know like what could the long-term effects could be.
And you have this newborn, they can't get
Exactly.
any type of shots even when it comes out, and it's like,
Hmm.
how do you protect the baby?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you basically had like your little bubble, or I guess that time they called it like little pods,
Yeah.
essentially, with like the families that go to the daycare. And that's essentially where you sent your older one to while you're home with the younger one.
Exactly. Yeah.
But still, it's still tough because you're trying to work from home and your wife probably also trying to work from home. And then you have this baby that you're trying to juggle at the same time.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I think what made it work out is that lucky enough is because of the timing of it. It was the early days of the pandemic that also coincided with when my leave started. Because once my second was born, then we went off on leave. So we were better able to manage that. At that point, I kind of had the experience under my belt from the first. So I was like more comfortable like watching one or both kids to give my wife a break. But there was a lot of load balancing between the two of us. And it continues to this day. I think if you're, again, lucky enough to, have a partner to co-parent with, it's huge because then you have that option of load balancing, Sorry to drop a tech term out there, but it really, it's so appropriate, right? Like just share the load.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for other parents who are trying to load balance? Like some people say like communication is really key. Some people say, having a very transparent schedule and shared calendar is really key. Like what's something that works for you?
I think that's essentially right. Early on, we didn't really adopt that. And we found that once we did kind of have like a very clear schedule, like, okay, so I'm in charge of, and this made sense. I'm in charge of like washing all the bottles and like, I'm in charge of making these meals and my wife might be doing, some other things, like once we had it figured out whose job was what, it made things a lot easier. And even now we have, a schedule. We know on what day who's doing drop off and pick up, who's in charge of meals, who's in charge of cleanup, who's like running put down for the kids. And it's huge. And we also have a family calendar. It's shared. A lot of these organizational skills that, you might pick up from work, you bring it back home and they still work, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, you have your roles and responsibilities listed, just like you're tackling a project.
Exactly. We have OKRs. Yeah. Yeah.
So then, along the lines of like your responsibilities and stuff. So, what is your day to day? I mean, I know it's summer right now. So, when school starts, is it kind of dropping them off at school, then they go to after school care, and then you pick them up after?
Yeah, that's pretty much right. And then, there's the morning routine, the evening routine on either end of that. And that's our time with the kids. And it's like, we try to be as present as possible. But, to be honest, sometimes it doesn't feel like a lot of time to do so many things. And it's fair because like I'm pretty sure when I was 6 or 4, I wasn't that motivated to like get washed up and change.
Not your priority at that age.
My 6-year-old might have a better sense of time, but my 4-year-old for sure doesn't. I kind of think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing where they don't have this awareness of time. We got them watches, but they don't really care for them.
They're not rushing to do the next thing.
Exactly. And they're like the picture perfect example of living in the present moment. And, this is something that I invest so much time and effort into trying to do as an adult because you're taken away from that. I think a lot of adults, especially ones that have demanding jobs, for sure, people in tech, you have to live in the future a fair amount because you're thinking ahead. You're thinking ahead for whatever projects you're working on. You're thinking ahead for whatever, for your team. And if you're managing, you're thinking over probably a longer time horizon. The context switch back to going back to the present isn't necessarily smooth or easy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, what are some things you do to make sure that you're able to stay present?
One thing that my wife and I picked up, my wife actually introduced me to meditation. While you're meditating, you're just paying attention to being, to your body, to what's happening. So that's one thing. But I think if I'm not doing that, and to be honest, I try to be disciplined and do it consistently, but sometimes life gets in the way and weeks or even months will go by where I don't meditate. But just having that awareness that like, okay, I'm in my head a little bit too much. much. Because I think once you have that awareness that, like, okay, you might spend a lot of time in your head ruminating on something, and there could be so much happening right there. A good example is with kids. Sometimes I'll be like lost in thought, and then my kid will want my attention, try to show me something. And then I'll be like, I'm sorry, what? And then I'll look back and be like, oh, I should have just snapped out of it. There's plenty of cues to push people back into the present moment. So you just got to pay attention, look out for them.
That's a good point. Because so many times we miss them. It's just another thing. But then when you slow down and you pay attention, you're like, wait a minute. They're all around us.
Exactly. I think it's very easy for at least certain things to like go through the motions. I mean, speaking for myself, I don't think I'm very present when I'm brushing my teeth. It's something that you do almost reflexively, just get it out of the way. And I think for things like that, you probably don't need to be present for that. But I think there's a lot of things like, for example, like food. It's one of those things where oftentimes I just like I'll just like shovel in food and like get the meal out of the way, where it could be even be food I enjoy and I don't really savor the experience. When I see my kids eat their sweets or treats,
They savor it.
they savor it
And it could be like the smallest thing, right?
for
And they
sure.
take forever to eat that small little cupcake or whatever it is. And I'm just like, wow, how do they do that? They take so long and they enjoy it. And it just looks like the best cupcake you've ever seen in your life. And I'm like, oh my God, it looks so good. And then when I eat it, it's not that good.
Yes, your standards will shift over time. Like I think that's also because like I think we've introduced our kids to a lot, but there's in like the universe of food, there's so much more for them to experience. So I think your standards kind of shift, and usually they get higher over time. But yeah, I think kids are great teachers in terms of like being present. They remind you. I look at them like I need to slow down and eat the way they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look at them and I'm like, the littlest things sometimes can make them so happy. And I'm just like, huh. It makes you do some self reflection of like, wow, I remember when the smallest things would just make my day and
Yeah.
want to go back to that. So, as you were saying, like the day to day routine, I was curious kind of like, what time do you put them to sleep at night and what time do they wake up in the morning?
Aspirationally, their bedtime is 7:30, and that could probably work for our older kid. I think the main thing is, being in elementary school, she doesn't take naps anymore. She's pretty tired by the end of the day. It could probably work for her. Our younger one, though, because she's still in preschool up until the end of this week, she gets anywhere between an hour up to 2 hours for a nap at school. So she's not that sleepy around 7:30. So we kind of we go with the flow because, if you push too hard with kids, then they push back, and sometimes explosively, and you don't want that at bedtime. So what we do is we try to like make the environment a little more sleepy and chill and mellow. We dim the lights, we try to slow ourselves down, get the kids into that mindset of sleep. But they'll still sometimes be like super excited, bouncing off the walls. My kids will be like trying to do headstands, right before bedtime, and all kinds of different things, and that's just how it goes. So trying to get them to settle down sometimes takes a little bit of work, but 7:30 is the goal. But actuality, it's anytime between 8 to 8:30. And the younger one sometimes will push it out to 9. She'll pop out of the room a bunch of times, gives us reports on how bored she is, how she can't find a comfortable position, she can't sleep.
So, do they wake up early as well?
Yeah, actually, that's the thing. They're pretty consistent about the time they wake up. They both wake up around 7 every morning. Part of it might be like we have this kind of, this night light that turns into like an okay to wake color, but they don't really necessarily adhere to that all the time. But at 7, it turns green. But sometimes they'll pop out earlier. Sometimes they'll sleep in, but when they sleep in, it's like for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, not too long.
Yeah, I'm always curious about that with other people's kids because I'm like, my kids wake up early. They never sleep
Yeah.
in. So I'm always like, do other people's? They'll have a hard time waking up when it's time for school. But then when it's like a weekend or a time when I'm like, oh, I could sleep in today. No, that's when they wake up early.
Yes.
So, how has your work life changed since you became a parent?
Probably the biggest way is like just I respect time a lot more because I realize how limited it is just in the span of the day. The hours go by quickly, so you need to be very intentional about how you spend them. And even in the mornings and evenings, like with the kids when our whole family is together, you want to kind of make those minutes, hours count. So get the things that you have to do out of the way. The important things like this is something that every parent figures out very quickly, that you gotta aggressively prioritize in a way that you didn't have to previously. And I thought before I became a parent that I was pretty good at prioritizing, like, but then when I take a step back and look back, I'm like, no, because there's no space for like reflexively scrolling through like Reddit or or Twitter or X, whatever. You cut that out a lot, and it was actually during the time of becoming a parent that I was like, okay, you know what? I don't really need social media, so deleted the apps one by one. Till now, I'm just left with Reddit.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. But I agree with you. It's like you used to just have time to do whatever. It's like, oh, I could do this thing. Like last week, so I came back from Asia first. My family was still there. And I was just sitting there like, wait, I don't have any responsibilities right now. Like, like it would be lunchtime and I'm like, oh, I gotta go cook. Wait, no, I don't have to. Oh, I gotta go tell someone to take a shower. No, I don't have to. Like, it was just me and the dog. And that was it. It was so crazy to just, you're just like, I have time. What am I going to do with it? Whereas, like, when the kids are around, you just feel like you don't have enough time all the time.
Yes. And I'm guessing that was like a huge luxury, right? To like have that the spaciousness of, a day without any specific responsibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to get used to. I think the first day I was constantly feeling guilty, like I was dropping the ball on something. I'm like, I need to be doing something. I'm like, wait, no, I actually don't. But it's like you almost don't know what to do with that time because you don't have it normally.
Yeah.
So it's like this like very crazy luxury that I'm just like, do I deserve this luxury? Like, what am I supposed to do with
Yeah.
it? And I imagine that's what it's like maybe when they all go off to college and stuff, and then I'm an empty nester, then I'm sure it's going to feel very much like, what is this? What is this silence? What is this clean house?
I think it's gonna be strange, It's gonna be some bittersweetness. It's gonna, the sad because those are your kids.
God, I'm gonna be that mom. I know it. I'm gonna be the one that's like crying in the dorm, and then my husband's gonna have to like shove me in the car and be like, "Just go."
I mean, it's your whole life, you've been like raising, nurturing. It makes sense, but then again, then there's a part of you, right, as a parent, like they're now going out into the world and becoming their own person in a big way. I mean, it's a process, right? It's happening the whole time. But I think culturally speaking, right, it's like when they leave home for schools, like that big kind of like demarcation, like, okay, they're a grown up now and they're really becoming their own person, right?
Yeah, and you can't like protect them or take care of things for them. You have to really let them go.
Yeah.
But I still have 4 years before my oldest, so I'm gonna try not to think about it for a while because 4 years will go by real quick.
It does. Yeah, like 6 and 4, that it feels like it flew by. The one thing I try to do, which kind of, it brings back that kind of that feeling of that like length of time, is when I, look at old photos and I intentionally go back. I'm like, oh wow, like look at my older one when she was a newborn, and then my younger one when she was 2, and then you're like, okay, so much has happened. I just think in the moment, it's really hard to have a good grasp on what a year or 2 years or 3 years feels like,
Absolutely. And then when those photos pop up, you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, they grew so fast, especially at the current ages, right? Like in elementary school and stuff, it's like even a week, 2 weeks makes a difference because they just grow so fast.
Yeah.
So, what has been your biggest struggle or challenge being a parent in tech?
I think this is pretty common. I think it applies to both my wife and I. I think with the prioritizing that you have to do with all the things you need to do for your kids, for your partner, and for your family, sometimes you leave yourself out of the equation, and it happens kind of in very subtle ways. Like, and then over time, it just builds up. You realize, like, oh wow, I haven't really taken much time to take care of myself. But then, as long as you like stay aware of that, and then try to be intentional, I think you can find a good balance. So that's one thing. I think a lot of parents struggle with that because between just kids, family, work, you're pulled in a lot of different directions. Like, it's a lot on your plate. But you hear about, like, I think self-care is like a very like kind of popular topic because I think you hear it a lot. People talk about self-care, but it's super important, right? Because like, when I think of this, I think of this one book, How Full Is Your Bucket? It's like a bestseller. They came out with a children's version. I only read the children's version, and we read it to our kids. But basically, the metaphor is like everyone has an invisible bucket, right? Like throughout the day, through all your interactions, you have like positive interactions, negative interactions, right? The positive interactions, the positive experiences, they fill up your bucket, whereas the negative ones, they drain your bucket, right? And if you don't take enough time to pursue bucket filling activities, taking time, like whatever it is, for some people, it could be like reading, it could be music, you might end up with an empty bucket. And the idea goes, if your bucket's empty, you can't fill up other people's buckets. It's a cute little metaphor, I like, but I think that pretty much sums up the importance of taking care of yourself and making sure that you have plenty of energy and reserves, emotional energy, physical energy, to be a good partner, to be a good parent, friend, sibling, all those things.
For sure. I like that they have a children's version too, because I think it's really important to teach those to kids starting at a young age.
Yeah.
So that they start to have those principles and stuff. That's really neat. So, what do you struggle with at their current ages of 4 and 6?
I don't know if it's so much of a struggle, but things that like we definitely are conscious of is like the choices that we're making, right? We realize that like now is a time where they're sponges, they're so adaptable, right? We want to make sure that we steer them towards things that they find fulfilling and will help with their growth over time. So like, are we making the right choices with stuff they do outside of school? Are we making the right choice with the school that they're at, the after school program, the camps they do? So our background is Korean American, and trying to expose them to that culture. Are we doing enough there? So I think just having a lot of that kind of weighing on your mind. And kids, I think they're so innocent, they're good. It's definitely not easy, especially, when kids are having a hard time, when they're fighting with each other or when they're not feeling understood. But I feel like for that, we just take time to like learn more about them and understand them better. That definitely gets easier over time. Because in the beginning, I think a lot of people can relate, like you don't know anything. You might have read books, but like when it comes down to it, when your baby's crying, I still remember like how helpless I felt. And I would just like apply an engineering mindset to like getting my baby to stop crying. And I would like cycle through like algorithmically like different approaches to like,
Yeah, you're like, I
yeah,
tried this. It's not that. I
exactly.
tried that. Still
Yep.
crying.
Nope, didn't work, still crying, nope. And then a lot of times it's something super obvious, like, oh yeah, it's time for their nap. Oops, it's like, they're probably hungry,
Yeah. I feel like, though, they go through that stage where they can't physically say it to you. And then later on, they go through the stage where they don't want to physically tell
Yeah.
you, when they're like in teenage years. Then I feel like at that point, I almost want them to be babies. Because at least, right, with babies, you can figure it out. Like, okay, are they hungry? They poop? Are they tired? When they're teenagers, it's like, no, they're not hungry. They're not tired. They're just not in a good mood.
Yeah, for sure. But kids are honest about that. They're honest about their feelings a lot of times. I don't want me to generalize because I think, some kids might hide their feelings more than others. But at least at this age, when they're upset, they'll let you know. I do sometimes wonder if they keep stuff in, like the stuff that happens at school, because like at least with our older ones, and I think this is a typical thing when I talk to other parents, but we'll ask like, how was school? How was your day? We'll get one word answer. Good. Like, fine, good. What did you do? I don't remember. Like the whole day. And then we realize, okay, it's too open-ended of a question. So we'll try to ask a more specific question. It's like, what's one funny thing that happened to you today? And sometimes still, I don't remember. My older one, she was in kindergarten last year. So we'll be like, what were your sight words for today? Sometimes they'll engage. Other times they won't.
Yeah, that's what I mean. As they get to preteen, teenage years, then it's more of
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember. It's fine. A while back, I had interviewed someone who he was saying like they did like a mini retro at the end of the day. So I started doing that with the kids at dinner. I'm just like, tell me something good that happened. Tell me something bad. And then when they're like, oh, the best thing that happened was this dinner right now. I'm like, oh God. There's got to be more. That's better. So like you said, it's like you almost have to really change the way you ask the
Yes.
questions so they can't just say it's fine, nothing.
No, I think that's definitely true. And I think the retro format, it exists for a reason, right? Like we do that too. We use roses and thorns as ours, like, what's your rose for today? But again, like kids are, they're unpredictable. Sometimes they really want to share and spill and engage. Other times, they have better things to do.
Other times it's fine.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
depending on their mood. So, earlier you talking about kind of filling your own cup and stuff. So I was wondering what helps you relax, unwind. What are the things that fill your cup?
anything that slows me down, that like takes me out of focus, like task oriented kind of work mode. And it could be just like having a meal outside in nice weather. It's like, and just experiencing that, feeling the whole thing, like, a meal that you might enjoy, and this, whether it's with my wife, sometimes when the kids are at school, we'll go out for lunch together or go for a walk. That's really nice. I always find time in nature to be very like refreshing, especially if you're in a place that's like pretty quiet and peaceful. Even more like direct things, like I think sleep, if I could get extra sleep, that is huge.
Sleep is such a luxury, right?
It is such a luxury, right? I think it probably started with the kids, but I used to be able to sleep in if I needed to or wanted to for quite a bit. But now it's like a lot of times you can't sleep in. But even like we also take turns with sleep in days on the weekends. But I think I just naturally get up earlier anyway.
Conditioned by now.
Yeah, I'm definitely conditioned for that. And then one thing that I like to do, I mentioned like meditation is like super helpful. It is not relaxing necessarily while you're doing it, but the effects afterwards, I feel very relaxed, very refreshed. So that's kind of interesting, like especially if you do like a retreat, like you do more than just like one session, even just like one session sitting down, you might get something out of, but like if you do it for like a week or 10 days, it takes it to another level.
Bet. And so, do you and your wife have like these meditation retreats that you go to?
Yeah, we try to each do one. We do this one that's like 10 days once a year. And I'm planning to do a 10-day in September and definitely looking forward to it.
And how does that work? Does one parent take care of everything while the other parent goes for 10 days?
Exactly. My wife just went on hers, and there's a very like distinct shift that's apparent after you come back from these things. Definitely a lot more relaxed, grounded, settled.
Gets so noticeable how the effects
Yeah,
on you.
exactly.
That's cool. And it's really neat that throughout this conversation, I'm hearing a lot of like you and your wife splitting things up equally, or like, okay, you get this time to yourself. Now she gets this time to herself. You sleep in these days. She sleeps in these days. I really like how you've split it up like that and made it, so you both get your me time. That's so important.
From the beginning, we kind of agreed. I don't know if it was explicit, but I think it became explicit that we wanted to, really partner up on the parenting, and not just parenting, like just like the whole on family stuff, so that, one person wouldn't be overburdened. So it's like whoever has the lighter load also will kind of shift for that too. Keep things in balance, right? Because if one person is overloaded, then things start to break down.
For sure. And especially with two young kids, like how do you manage work-life balance?
Probably the most important thing is just being very clear about boundaries, like when's family time, when's work time, and really sticking with it. I think we do a pretty good job with it. It didn't happen just instantaneously. I think it's something that we worked up to over some time. But then, when we stop and think, we understand as parents, like certain things are, non-negotiable priorities, right? And these are things that have to get done. And you work around that, right? I like metaphors. It reminds me of this one. You might have heard of this one. When you think of your priorities, you can kind of think of your different priorities as like balls that you're juggling at any one given point in time. Some of them are glass, some of them are plastic. This comes from like a Twitter thread, a very popular Twitter thread is like a Q&A with Nora Roberts, but the glass ones, you best not drop. The plastic ones, like it'll be okay if you drop those. And a good example might be like, if you need to get a new pair of shoes, that could wait. Your kid has a doctor's appointment, that cannot wait. Things like that, work around that. I think also if you have the flexibility, so I took a little bit of break from my last job, and I think the model where you have one working parent definitely makes things easier in that regard, because then in terms of like load balancing, the other person can take on a considerable amount more, which is always helpful.
Definitely. So, the last question I like to ask is what's something you would tell someone who's planning to have kids or something you wish you knew before you became a parent?
Honestly, I would say go for it, right? Like, I think it is one of those things where there's a lot of unknown before you kind of venture in there. But once, you have your babies, it is impossible to not, let them into your heart. And then once that happens, everything falls into place. And the one thing I realize is that, over time, you hear a lot of different types of advice given about, what to expect when you're a parent. And, I probably heard it before, and I definitely remember hearing these things, but didn't need to internalize them. A lot of people will have the tools by the time they become parents, especially if you have kids a little bit later in life. A lot of things will be settled. You won't have, certain things that need to be figured out. Financially, that's also helpful too. There's tons of wisdom out there just waiting to be received and internalized in terms of what to do, and just listen to it. I remember when we were starting out, we got advice and recommendations from random people, like from our friends. One of my managers, I think she was actually my skip manager. She's the one who introduced this one book on sleep for your kids called The Happy Sleeper. My wife, she's a very voracious reader. She had already read like 4 books on sleep for kids before that. And then this is the one that we ended up settling on. And she was like, this is amazing. And it worked because it's like a more gentle approach to getting your kids sleep trained that doesn't involve crying it out, that kind of stuff. And there's like influencers out there. We love Dr. Becky Kennedy, and she has a lot of great insights on parenting. I think she has a lot of great ideas, but basically it's like, and I think a lot of parenting approaches like look at your kids as whole people. Like, I think the mindset of like kids being kids, and they are full people. They might not have coping mechanisms for their emotions, but their emotions are just the same and whatnot. And sometimes talking to your children that way makes them feel a lot more heard and whatnot. But anyway, there's a wealth of information out there, and the rest you just figure out as you go. So that's probably my suggestion out there. I have 0 regrets. I love being a dad. We love being parents. My wife would say the same thing, I'm sure. And yeah, your kids will definitely fill your heart with love, and that's hopefully we do the same for them.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Max, for sharing your story with us today and sharing all of your insights. It was really fun talking to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chow. I was really happy to be on your podcast finally.
Thank you, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
All right, you too.
Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, @parenthoodbites.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbites.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.